Can you talk a little bit more about Vladika Tikhon? I know a lot of people do know his book, and uh, what is his? So, was he the first abbot at Streltsynski after it was reestablished, or was it a working monastery? And also,
No,
maybe talk
no,
about
it was
Streltsynski.
ruins. He was
Okay.
given ruins. And as he says in his book, this was all done by the blessing of his spiritual father, Father John Christiankin, in the Pskov Case Monastery. He was in Donskoy Monastery. I believe he was the econom, which means sort of like the steward, you know. He's sort of the next person after the abbot, or, one of the next second or third. Um, and something happened there. He was having difficulties, and the abbot was kind of like pushing him out of the monastery. And so he went to Father John and said, "What should I do?" And Father John said, blessed him to start a podvordia and a presence in Moscow of the Pskov Monastery, because, as you know, Father Tikhon started his monastic life there as a novice. He was sort of requisitioned from that monastery to come and serve with Metropolitan Peter Im, who at that time was the head of the Moscow Patriarchate uh, publishing department. And the publishing department published not only books, but they created films and so forth about the Orthodox Church. And that coincided with the 1,000-year anniversary of the baptism of Russia. So Vladika Peter Im really needed some help. And of course, they knew that there was this novice there in Skopje's monastery who was serving in the cattle barn, scrubbing the cows, who was graduated of a very prestigious cinematography school in Moscow. And so, and also a very talented person. So he was requisitioned. And they made a wonderful film. I don't know where it is now, but it was a very nice film about the Russian Orthodox Church. It was a very exciting time, actually. And Metropolitan Peter Reem was a very distinguished person in the Russian Orthodox Church at that time. Um, Everybody knew him. Everybody admired him and loved and respected him. And he he turned that publishing department into something very dynamic and important. He managed to find common language with people in authority, which made it possible to publish books under very strained circumstances in those days. Um, so, anyways, uh, Vladika Tikhon ended up being a novice under him. He was one of his subdeacons and working on films. And then when Vladika Peterin was no longer the head of the department, Vladika Tikhon went to the Donskoy Monastery, which also had just been opened. Now, Donskoy Monastery is where, at the time, his name was George, as a novice. Now, Donskoy Monastery was where the relics of Patriarch Tikhon were buried. But it wasn't exactly known where they were. So he was involved in the discovery of the relics and the uncovering of them, and then, canonization, all that stuff. So he was also a key person in that. And then, of course, he was tonsured with the name Tikhon after Patriarch Tikhon of Moscow. So then when things started changing when this problem came up at Donskoy, Father John Christiankin blessed him to start this affiliate to this Metochian of the Skopje's monastery in Moscow. And you can read about that in the book. He talks about how that was almost impossible at the time because they weren't opening Metochians of monasteries in Moscow at the time. But it just so happened that there was a danger of the Skopje's monastery ending up as part of Estonia. because all the borders were being redrawn everywhere as the Soviet Union was collapsing. So that's how that was blessed by the patriarch, um, Alexei II at the time. So Father John told him they're going to offer you 3 different places to start this Metokian at. Refuse the first 2 somehow and accept only the third. And that's what he did. The third was this monastery. And the first 2 were actually very enticing. They were excellent places, huge. They would have been wonderful places for a monastery, but he was blessed not to take them. So he ended up at Sredinsky, and it was ruins. The main church of the meeting of the Vladimir Mother of God was had been used for various things. It was an icon restoration school. It was this and that, and it was total ruins inside. The territory, they had no wall. Territory was all mangled up. There was a high school built on the former cemetery, and this is what he inherited. But he's a very energetic person, and he managed to, rebuild everything. And then, of course, just in recent years, before he was transferred to Pskov, he built that cathedral dedicated to the resurrection of Christ and the Holy New Martyrs and Confessors of Russia, which, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm alone, is a miracle, because to get all of the permits and the permission to build in the center of Moscow a cathedral of that size and a place where there hadn't been a cathedral before, it wasn't recovering something that was taken away during Soviet times. To actually get that done, I think it's a miracle, really. And the cathedral was not just some kind of caprice of his, it was so needed, because I myself experienced going to all the services in the Sredinsky monastery, the monastery of the Vladimir Icon, which is not a totally small church, but there's so many people wanting to come to the services there that we were just packed. It was really, really hard. People had to stand outside for services, and that was especially hard in the wintertime. They would put up those heating elements everywhere, but people couldn't stand inside the church, and there wasn't a single square inch left. So it really was needed. And Patriarch agreed and blessed it, and that's why they started building that cathedral. But that's a whole story that, of course, could go on and on about, but that would probably get boring for everybody for your interview. So Metropolitan Tikhon really is quite a dynamic person, and a very deeply religious person. He was formed by people like Father John Christiankin. He's a very intelligent person. He's been able to get an incredible amount of things done that I don't know. I just don't know how many people would have been able to accomplish such things. And now he's in Pskov. He's, just you take all of his obediences to put together. By the way, none of which he chose himself. These were all appointments. He's the Bishop of Pskov and Porkhov. I think it's considered one of the poorest, if not the poorest, province in Russia. He's the abbot of the Pskov Caves Monastery, which is an ancient monastery that was never closed under the Soviet period because of the fact that it had been in part of Estonia during the really bad persecutions. He's the head of the Patriarchal Council for Culture, which means he interfaces with the Ministry of Culture in all sorts of cultural projects having to do entirely with the church. I won't even go on. It would be hard to name all the things that they've done. Incredible amount of things they've done in the past, in the years since he was given that appointment. Um, and now I think he was given even some more appointments. I can't remember exactly which, but anyways, any one of those things would be enough for one person just to do them all. I think it's because he has a talent for administration. He has a talent for putting the right people in the right positions, answering to him. But also because I don't think he sleeps very much. I think he's just always on the job. I think he's always working, and at the same time not neglecting prayer service. He's not one of these people. He's not one of these people that because of all these other duties ends up neglecting church services. He's constantly at the vigil services at Pskov Cave, constantly serving in Pskov. Um, at this major service or that. So it really sometimes boggles the mind how he gets everything done. he's in that sense he's definitely someone to emulate, not giving sleep to his eyes nor slumber to his eyelids. Yeah, there are some amazing people here in Russia, and I just I couldn't even I could the whole books could be written about them, but um, let's just suffice to say that it's hard for people who don't live here or don't know the language to really understand what an incredible treasury there is here of people who had contact with different elders that went through that whole period of persecutions. Just Father John Christiankin alone, he died on the eve of the celebration of the new martyrs and confessors of Russia, which to me, to me and to most people is pretty strong indication of just what he meant to Russia. He was truly a confessor. The things that he experienced and went through um, really made him a treasury of Orthodox Russian, even specifically Russian Orthodox experience. Because I know a lot of people get into this sort of, I don't know, arguments or whatever, or discussions of sort of like who's more spiritual. Are the Greeks more spiritual with all their wonderful monasteries and all of their very highly spiritual elders and incredible monastic life and long, two millennia of existence and all of that stuff, or Russian, yeah, as opposed to purely Russian sort of Orthodox spirituality. They are sort of different, um, but I've always been extremely admiring of the just the Russian experience in this past century because of the incredible amount of new martyrs and confessors who were so strong throughout that horrible period of time, where everybody was against them, um, and we're able to preserve the church through all of that, and then hand it over to the younger generation. Whether or not there will ever be anybody like that again, I don't know. It's hard to say. Uh, they had an experience that, of course, we don't have. Who knows? Maybe we'll have it in the future. Maybe through their prayers, we'll be able to live through some kind of persecutions that might be coming upon us. We don't know, but that kind of experience is not something that you get on your own. As Father John Christiankin used to say, some of the most spiritual times of his life were when he was in prison, because he felt like Christ was right there next to him, helping him through everything. He understood how, literally we can't accomplish anything without Christ. And um, he lived through that. It's interesting because you might have heard of Father George Calciu, who was from Romania and lived through those horrible Romanian prisons. He once came and talked with us at our monastery when I was back in California, and he said, I came to learn in prison that I cannot do anything without Christ. We cannot do anything without Christ. I can't pick up this pencil from here and put it down there. There's nothing we can do without Christ. And that's they understood, these people who went through that experience understood it as a real thing. We understand it theoretically, but they understood it in practice. Yeah. So Father Metropolitan Tikhon, he came in close contact with that kind of spirituality, and I think he lives and practices that now.